The first item on the agenda is entitled Effective Use of Online Practice. Please put your hands together for Zaid bin Hamad.
Thank you. Good morning, guys. How are you today? Okay, as you can see from the title, today we're going to be talking about online practice, and we're going to focus a lot on the benefits to our students. What I'd normally do in a session like this is I would use an example. I'd use an online practice platform that you would either be using or about to use, and would go into a lot of technical details, how to log on and register, etc., etc. But I'm not going to do that today. What we're going to do is we're going to talk more about the concept of online practice. And so just before I start, I'd like you just to look at the picture on the screen. How familiar is this in your classrooms? You give your students an activity, and instead of looking at the books, they're looking at their phones. Raise of hands if this happens to you in class. No? Doesn't happen to you? Wow, interesting. Enforcing the rule. Good. Yesterday I was actually looking at some of you during the sessions to see if you had your phones out, to use it as an example today. But I must say I didn't see that once. So hats off to you guys for that. Okay, what do our students do when they're on their phones? What do you think they do? Are they connected to the internet, or are they just reading something, looking at photos? Sometimes as a dictionary. Yeah. Okay. So, when they're on their phones, or back at home using their laptops or other smart devices, how long do you think they spend doing this a week? Yeah, just really quickly talk to your partner about this. What's the number that comes up? What do you think?
4 hours a day.
So what do you guys think? We have 28 hours here a week. Between 20 and 30. 40. 30 to 40, wow. Wow, okay. The number, it may be as much as 40 in Saudi, but the average amongst young people in the world is, shockingly, almost a full day per week online. We do as well, exactly. And since that's now the norm amongst young people and amongst most people these days, as teachers, as English language teachers, how can we use this to our benefit? How can we utilize this for our students? And that's hopefully what we'll be looking at during the session today. So what I'm planning on talking about is extensive practice outside of the classroom and how this affects the language learning process. And then I'd like to talk a little bit about blended learning and some of the benefits of this to the learner. Then we'll talk about how this affects and helps us to improve our students' communication skills. Then we'll have a really quick talk about the benefits of this. And if we have time, we'll look at the unconventional using online practice in the classroom rather than outside of the classroom. So what I'd like you to do now is, could you guys sort of sit together? I know you spread out. Would it be okay if you guys sat together just for the next activity? Okay. I'd like you to look at the questions on the board. So for 5 minutes, do you encourage your learners to continue their learning outside of the classroom? Yeah, we can find one for you. Yeah, okay. So I'd like you in 5 minutes to discuss some of the questions on the screen. Yeah, so sort of the ways that you encourage your learners, how you do this, the type of activities you give them, how do you give them feedback, and how is this viewed by your learners? Muhammad. What do you guys think?
Actually, to become autonomous learners. And once we want them, of course, if you allow them to do it on their own without assigning any homework, it might be very hard for them just to go back to what happened in class actually. So assigning homework, homework to do so they can bring to class and you can share. It is actually both. It is from the course book and actually some extra activities that they can do.
Yeah, I mean, in different ways. Ones are the extra activities from the book, like writing, for example. But also, one thing I stress to students is watch films in English. Say to them that helps you a lot. Watch something that you like. Maybe you can watch it in Arabic, but watch it again in English if you can. It depends on the level. I said to the ones that are more, you remember yesterday there is a broad spectrum. I said if you can do it without the subtitles, take it off. But if you can't, use the subtitles. Because something is getting through. They can hear some words that they know they have heard, but they may not remember what it means. But looking at the subtitles, they will say, that's what it means.
Do you have any feedback mechanisms set up to see how they're progressing? If so, yeah, we really need that. We have so much data.
I mean, when I was teaching abroad, this is just simple. I get them to do group work and then splash work using the Venn diagram, get them to interact. Just sitting there with the teacher all day, it's not going to learn.
Well, a lot of informal assessment.
So you have to do whiteboard splash or blackboard, whatever you want to call it. You write down notes, or you tell them a goal. You write down they write down their answers, what you think the goal is, and then at the end of it, at the end of the class, you actually relate their goals to what they actually learned in the lesson. You'll actually be surprised if you're not dressing correctly. What they've written down, you can give you a Rick and Morty.
Well, midterm, we have a midterm.
Well, I do encourage them. I put links up. I give them links, but I don't follow up on it because, in a sense of, they are university students, so it's, learning is up to them. It's not, I don't feel responsible for as such. But, and I don't really know if they do it or if they don't do it. Half. I think, I do. Each day, learning a language. Taking responsibility for their own learning.
I understand the point about giving feedback on the activity because they need to take the initiative and be responsible for that. But do you get feedback from them? Interesting, useful, help their language process?
Part of our course is online. So it's the Saudi Electronic University, and they do EF online.
Okay, yes.
And so, I will get a report of how much they've done, and unfortunately, each time I see the student, each day I will have to read or say, you must do your work, you must do your work. And then they, most of them do it because of the consequences. Yeah, if they don't do it, yes, it's graded.
That's a good initiative, sort of a stick approach rather than a
Yeah. It's not ideal.
So how do they see the learning outcome? Do they consider it as sort of homework they have to do, or is it them taking it?
No, so much with him, and something like that. But he sounds positive in the class, but what happens, I don't know.
It's good that you've got sort of the ball rolling, sort of the taking up all the speed might be slow. That's interesting. Okay, some interesting points from some of the discussions that I heard from you guys. So from this, a number of challenges obviously came up. So when you ask questions like these, you hear a lot of feedback on challenges that teachers have with this. And I've heard a couple of points here about students not taking responsibility for their learning and not feeling that this is something they have to take the initiative for. What are some other challenges, do you think, when trying to get our students to do extensive learning or extra activities outside of the classroom? David.
There aren't that many opportunities here at Top for Louise Shade to engage in kind of English-related activity. I mean, there are, but they're very few. Like if you were in Riyadh, there's some cultural activities that different embassies, consulates, like government versus organization or something. But here it's kind of much more remote. So once you're outside of the university, you won't see another Westerner or English people. Counteract that, they encourage them to speak English to Filipinos and Indians.
Okay, interesting. So you talked about, David mentioned the lack of resources or the lack of opportunity for students here. Any other ideas?
Have the students have a chance.
Is that a challenge or a solution?
Oh, a solution.
Okay, so a solution to include students on a chat. A chat. That's interesting because I've got that coming up in a few slides as well. Yeah?
Maybe a challenge for our students, they're doing a year to prepare themselves to use English as a modules. So they do 4 hours a day on campus. When they leave campus, they've got family tasks to do and maybe homeworks connected with their other courses they do, from math, calculus, computing. So it's not impossible, just saying that they do have multiple demands upon their time, so they do have some valid excuses as to why.
Yeah, exactly. So students don't have enough time to do everything we'd like to assign them. Any other ideas from you guys? Yeah.
There's, a lot of my students come up to me and say, how can I improve my English? Because they only have it for like 2 hours and get free, maximum 5 hours a week. And how can I improve it? And what I advise them to do is become a member of an online language exchange club. There are clubs like that, and the way they work, there's like a matching engine. I speak this language, and I want to learn this. So they'll match you with a person somewhere in the world that will speak 1 hour in English to you, and then you have to teach it Arabic for 1 hour.
Okay.
This way you don't spend any money.
Interesting. So setting up the students in an online club.
I get them to give me 7 new words that they see from the time they wake up to the time they go to bed every day. They give me 7 new words each. The words that they see every day, so they're reinforcing it, they're repeating it, and it's something which is intrinsic to their life. And they like it.
How interesting is that for the other students?
No, they like it. They like it. Each student has to give his own or her own, his own vocabulary. 7 words, 7 new words. a day.
7 new words a day. Interesting. Yeah.
What I was thinking is like one of the biggest challenges is for the students to be able to see the goals of the class and the aims. So for instance, then it might be only to get a grade, to take a test.
Yes. So the aim of the class in the students' eyes is just to pass and to move on to the next level. So some of the challenges that I have prepared are these, and you mentioned most of them. Lack of suitable resources, David talked about that. Goal-oriented learning, you just talked about having a set goal to pass the exam. We also have a problem with learners with individual learning needs, where some of our students respond to certain types of activities while others don't. And we also talked about students don't know what to study on their own. So they are not able to take responsibility for their learning. Okay, so a question for you guys now. What's the most influential factor which influences whether the students study outside of the classroom or not? It's a one-word answer, by the way. Exactly, motivation, yes. So motivation is the most influential factor here. And I think you sort of latched on to the point about students not knowing where they're going with this and not realizing the benefits of doing extra activities when they go home. Real quickly, I'd like you to think about the benefits of getting our students to do extra reading and listening activities outside of the classroom. And I know Terry covered listening yesterday in her second session. So what would the benefits be for our learners, for them to do extra activities in listening and in reading? So, yeah. Okay, but directly linked to English language learning rather than...
It's quite simple, basically. If you only have to study for 3 hours a week, so by doing reading and listening exercises at home, you're actually bringing what they're meant to be learning in class to outside their memory, and you're bringing up their motivation and confidence in class.
Yes,
So it's
exactly.
quite simple circle.
Exactly, and I think you sort of summarized that very nicely. So these are some of the benefits that we have, yes. So the positive attitude is really important as well. It's getting a positive attitude for us in our students' mind to why they're doing the activities and where they're going with this. And our students don't seem to realize that to acquire the language, practice is key. And in a way, it's a bit like learning to play an instrument or playing a sport. And we always hear stories of how many hours footballers spend practicing a day to become who they are. And this is what our students don't always realize. They don't always realize that the more they practice, the more this will help them, and the higher the level will be. Some of the benefits for speaking and writing outside of the classroom, and I'm not going to focus on this because some of you mentioned this and they're very similar to the reading and listening. Notice the confidence building, and that's key for our students. The more they practice outside of the classroom, the more confident this helps them to become. Exactly, so having authentic materials outside of the classroom. Okay, let's move on to talk a little bit about blended learning. The previous slides we talked about extra activities outside of the class, and these weren't necessarily connected to online practice or digital learning. What I'd like to talk about now is a little bit about blended learning. And I have a definition on the board, which I would like you to think about. What do you think the missing words are? With the person next to you, 2 minutes, what do you think the gaps should be, or the words in the gaps should be? Any ideas? Okay, I'll give you a hint. The first word is combination. Yeah, a mixture combination is fine either way. Are there any ladies upstairs? Now, strictly speaking, blended learning isn't necessarily the combination of face-to-face learning and online learning. It's more general than that. It's a combination of face-to-face learning and extracurricular activities. But now, in the digital age, it's understood as being a combination of online learning and face-to-face learning. So, what I want you to do now is think about which of these activities can be done with a teacher, can be done without a teacher, and which of these activities need to have the teacher present in the class. So, correction of mistakes. What do you guys think? Yeah, both ways. And there are no wrong or right answers here. It's just to get an idea of the concept of blended learning. So, what do you think?
Yeah, in the traditional sense for the most part. But again, like you said, they have so much available to them outside that they can't learn the language together. But the input of the new language was without a teacher. Where would you come in? Do we need a teacher at all? Could the learning be done without a teacher? Well, no, you need them for smiling, drilling, stuff. So, no, we're not disregarding the content. Sorry, usage form. To a certain extent.
What about drilling? What about drilling? Drill a particular language concept or word.
Well, it's depending. If you want to give that exercise to a student, say, okay, I want you to give the other students in the teaching method here to see their understanding.
Okay, the idea is, because in this case the student would then be considered the teacher in a particular situation.
Well, no, I'm on about the group work.
No, the idea is, do we have a human teacher or do we have them practicing outside the classroom? That's the comparison.
But even, I'm sure they can find the audio of a certain
Because
phrase.
isn't drilling a two-way street? So when you drill your students, is the next step listening to what they say and then focus? So for example, if I'm drilling my students and they're word perfect from the first word, pronunciation is better than mine. Do I drill them again or do I move on? You move on. But then the second word, if they're struggling with that, what do? Do I move on? Do I repeat?
We'll repeat. So it's to a certain
So
extent.
it's an element of feedback. So it's a two-way street rather than a. So what do you think?
Also natural speech as well.
Natural speech, yeah.
That needs a teacher because obviously they'll just pronounce it the way it's written.
Okay, some interesting things here. So for input of new language, what do you guys think? You need a teacher. You not necessarily. Sometimes yes, sometimes no. Bit of both. Really? Okay, I'm going to ask the same question I asked your colleagues. What about drilling? Yeah. How accurate are those programs? Have you had experience with those? I haven't much, but what I know is that speaking activities usually require a human element. Yeah, it's just because the software we haven't advanced that much yet. Robots haven't taken over. Yeah. Yeah. What about? It does. It depends on the aims as well. But what about, for example, collaborative project work? Do we need a teacher? Do we not need a teacher? Or is the right question, how involved does a teacher need to be? Does the teacher need to be in the classroom? Can the teacher be involved remotely? Yeah. So you get the idea where I'm going with this. So a lot of what we do in the classroom can be done with the teacher being in a remote location, or connected digitally to the students, or sometimes not need a teacher at all. So let's say that you wanted to implement some of these ideas with some of your students. A lot of teachers say, it's a nice idea, but it's never going to work. Yeah, that's never going to work. I'm not going to waste time trying to do this in the class with my students who barely turn up. And it's simpler than some people would think. So the steps, the normal conventional steps would be, the first thing is to make sure your students have access to the materials you're going to give them. So it's no use assuming that your students all have internet access, for example. As a professional teacher, you would need to check. You would need to make sure that the material is available to the students. If you're planning an activity using smartphones, you need to make sure all of your students have smartphones. This is, I think, the most crucial step, otherwise everything breaks down later on. The second thing is, this may be a new idea to your students as well as you. So it's a good thing to demonstrate activities. Yesterday in the listening session, we looked at how listening can be done on an online practice platform. And now for our students who are not familiar with LMSs or online platforms, here it would be a good idea for the teacher to bring this up in class and show the students what they need to be doing. It's always a good idea to get feedback from your students. And I think I talked about this with a couple of your colleagues who had some very good ideas promoting online activities to their students. And the question came up, do we follow up and see how well this is received by our students? And I think the idea is that students, if they're not interested, if they don't know the benefits of doing this, if they don't know where we're going with this, they just won't do it. Choose the correct activities. And we noticed on the previous slide that some things can be done in classroom and some things would most likely need a teacher. And that's where you come in. You decide from your students which of the activities would work outside of the classroom. And so if you feel, for example, input of new language for your student works, that's fine, but it doesn't work with everybody. So you may choose to go simple and give them an extra listening activity or vocab activity. It's always important to calculate time as well. I think your colleague mentioned about students having a lot of demand outside of the class, from family obligations to other homework from other subjects. So it's always good to calculate how much time our students would need to do a particular activity. And also, if you're starting this out with your class for the first time, it's always good to get feedback from them and to move forward with this. This may work with some students, with the other class it won't work. So understanding feedback from your students is key as well. This is something that comes up a lot in Saudi Arabia. So a lot of teachers look at the online practice, they look at the platform and they say, this is great, but our students are never going to do it. And when we dig deep and sort of look for why, they say very simply because it's not assessed. It's not part of their final grade. And a possible answer for that is not to go through management and try to get the assessment rubrics change or the system change, but rather to offer your students extra marks for doing this. So some of your students will need 5 extra marks to get to a particular grade, to go into a particular college. This is where it's useful to offer them these 5 extra marks for doing the online practice. If they don't, that's fine. If they do it, then you give them the extra marks, and this is an incentive.
Saying that, are you developing an even keel for some students that do not have internet?
Well, this is where we would go to the very first step and check, do all students have access? Because if they don't, then it's not fair giving them this opportunity. Sorry. And the final point is pair students up. Now, when we talk about pairing students, we automatically think about this in classroom. Okay, you with this person next to you, please work together. But we sometimes forget that our students are very social, especially in Saudi Arabia. The students are either friends or neighbors or cousins, sometimes even brothers in the same class. And so pairing them up isn't as difficult as we might think. And sometimes this is a good idea to get students to do this together. Okay, let's look at another idea. What's happening here? Do you think, when I say flipped classroom, is this the right idea? Did we talk about turning the classroom upside down? No. Okay, just before I move on, what do you guys know about flipped classroom? What can you tell me about the concept of flipped classroom? Exactly, yes. So input of new language or pre-teaching vocabulary or other language items before class and then practicing in classroom. And this is a really nice diagram that sort of summarizes a flipped classroom approach. And I think from what I've seen, a lot of people don't focus on the after part. So most people, when they talk about flipped classroom, they talk about pre-teaching and then practicing in the classroom. But it's also really important to follow up with afterwards as well. And this is where a really good online practice platform comes in handy. When you have a very good LMS, this gives you the opportunity to upload your own content or use pre-prepared content to pre-teach a vocab item. And then when you, for example, and then when you're in the classroom, then you are able to give personalized feedback and focus on the different types of students and basically help the students if they are facing any difficulties. And then after that, you would use the online platform again for your students to do further practice. And this can help you in the sense that it saves a lot of time. So if you're using an online platform, a sort of a holistic solution, then this gives you the opportunity to have a lot of pre-prepared items. But the question comes up, why? Why would we use the flipped classroom approach? How would this help? Exactly, the first one, yes, save teachers time. Any other ideas? Sorry? It's less boring. That's very true. Students can find it. Sorry? Yes, so they're more involved in their language learning process, and they can take control as well. Yes, so passing the responsibility on to our students. Very true. Yes, so more exposure to language, or they can work at their own pace. So everything you said is probably said better than I had prepared, but these are some of the points that I have. And so the first one is, yes, it encourages independent learning, it encourages our students to take responsibility of their learning, and they can work at their own pace. And this is key for students who are at lower levels. Students are very motivated by seeing their grades in the gradebook and getting instant feedback, and also using content that's relevant to them. So our students are very digital. Everything they do is either on YouTube or Snapchat or WhatsApp or Facebook, and that's our students. So giving them content that they understand, that's a huge motivational tool for us as well. Measurable learning in the sense that a gradebook or a feedback function on the LMS or an online practice platform would give you as a teacher feedback on your students' activities, so you can see which students are doing what. And a really nice feature on one of the gradebooks that I've seen, it gives you instant feedback. So for example, if you had a red line across for one student, then you know at a glance that student is having difficulty in your class. On the other hand, if you saw a vertical line, then you would know that all the students are having trouble with a particular unit or a particular activity, and then you know that you need to focus more on that and do extra work with your students. So it's a great way of getting feedback. The content is usually almost always editable, and usually gives you the opportunity to upload your own content as well. Okay, another that I want to talk about with regards to online practice is getting our students to communicate better with themselves and with us as teachers. And I'm hoping to cover the answers to these two questions. Generally, teachers struggle with giving students individualized instructions and feedback, and also extending the communication outside of the classroom just because of the workload that teachers have. Classrooms are 40, 50 students per class. Teachers have to teach 6 hours a day or 5 hours a day. There's just no time to do this. So, a really quick question: how can we give our students individualized feedback and instructions? Other than talking to them in the classroom and saying, you need to do this. By the way, you did mention this earlier, so you did actually answer to this question earlier, if you can remember it. You mentioned about using live chat, so using a messaging tool, and so your colleague mentioned about using a live chat functionality. So the question is, let's say you're not using an online practice platform. Let's say you don't have an LMS where everyone has access to, which is the case in some situations. So what would be an alternative for using the live chat on that platform? What other tools could you use in this case? Live chat, you didn't give an example of a particular platform earlier. WhatsApp? Yeah? Messenger on Facebook? Sorry? Yeah, Google Classroom, if you've got that set up as well, yes. So, some of the benefits of using a live chat or a messaging function with your students is to communicate with the entire class. And this is especially useful to give them updates. So really easy for a teacher just to send a WhatsApp message to a group of students about the date of the exam, or an announcement, classes cancelled, etc.
I was just saying, to elaborate on the Google Classroom, I mean, you set assignments, group work, group display, and then within the settings on Google Classroom, you can see that the whole group sees it, or the individual assignment. One person replied to another, one person edit another person, so on. So it's just, if you set a question, one person answers it, the next student can relate their understanding of their fellow colleagues' answer, so on and so forth.
That sounds like an LMS on its own. So that's really interesting.
I mean, you set all that up straight to Google Classroom.
Yeah.
You don't need anything.
Yeah, that's interesting. Yeah, Blackboard, I'm not talking about particular platforms, because I'm talking more general of the concept of communicating with students remotely or using online tools. So these are some of the benefits of communicating with the entire class. So rather than writing it on the board or making sure everybody's heard you, if all your students are in a WhatsApp group, then you just send them a text, by the way, the exam is tomorrow at 10 o'clock. Or you would tell them the objective for this week is the present perfect, and the theme of the unit is travel, and we will be covering 20 new vocab words or vocab or phrases on travel, for example. In one of my classes before, my students actually set up their own Facebook group and added me to it rather than the other way around. So sometimes you'll find students are motivated in using social media or other ways to communicate with the teacher. You can also use direct messaging to communicate with individual students. And this is really helpful when you're giving personalized feedback, or if you want to give different instructions on different activities. And this is especially useful if you have a mixed ability class. Some of your students are high-level students, they're stronger students they don't need to focus on some aspects of the language, you would give them a task. Other students need a bit more support, and this is where a particular tool like this comes in very handy. However, the messaging tool that we've talked about in concept is usually a one-way street. So we've talked about giving instruction, announcements, updates, feedback. So a one-way street from the teacher, sorry. So we're also interested in to extend communication. So a two-way street, back and forwards between the students and the teacher. And there are two ways we can do this. By using the live chat function, and students are probably all familiar with this. I don't think we should say some of them. All of them now are familiar with live chat. And students love connecting with their teachers. They find this hugely motivating. And students love to form a connection with their teachers and have a friendly relationship with their teachers. And teachers can usually use this for their own benefit. We can also use a discussion tool. And this is coming back to what your colleague mentioned on Google Classrooms. And a discussion tool is where you would have a forum where you would have particular threads or topics, and then the students would comment and reply to each other's comments and open up the room for discussion without having the constraints of a lesson, so have to do it in an hour or an hour and a half, or without students feel that they're going to be judged by their peers or graded by the teacher. Discussion boards are usually set up by teachers and moderated by the teachers as well. But the contributions come from the students. Teachers may want to post about a particular subject, but they would encourage most of the input to come from the students. And it's important to get, it's a useful tool to get our students writing as well, used to actually using their smart devices for communicating in English on particular subjects. It gives them the chance to actually reflect before they post something, and a lot of discussion forums now, and I use Facebook as an example because most people know about Facebook, is you can edit your comment. So even if students make a mistake or they feel embarrassed by what they've written, it doesn't matter, they can delete that or edit it as they see fit. And it gives the students the opportunity to actually have a discussion where they evaluate other students' opinions and respond to other ways of thinking. And teachers usually like to implement this in the classroom, but they often have trouble getting students to participate. So a teacher could go through a lot of work setting this up, thinking of appropriate subjects that would interest the students and keep them engaged, and you post something and then nobody responds. So some ideas for you to combat this is make it a requirement. Make it part of the assessment in class, yeah. Yeah. Exactly. So making this part of the general assessment or final grade. And this can be something, it doesn't have to be connected to what you're doing in the classroom. So for example, if your students are interested in football, for example, then you could get them talking about the match last night on the discussion forum. And as a teacher, you would be the moderator. But it would also give the students the opportunity to talk about what they always talk about, but in English. And giving them the opportunity to respond to other people's replies and comments as well. Okay, so here are some of the benefits of using online practice in general. Does anybody have anything to add to any of these points? It's useful for the students to use the resources that they have available. A lot of times we think about getting our students to go onto a particular website that they've never heard of before and doing a task that they don't know how to start, and that's very daunting for the students. But if we set them a task, so if your students are used to using, for example, Google Classrooms, like your colleague mentioned, or Blackboard, then this is where you start. Start with somewhere that they're familiar with, and then take it from there. And it's very motivating for the students in ways that we often don't realize. Students like the novelty of going online and doing work. They've been using books and workbooks and notepads all their lives. So if we change that and give them the opportunity to do something online, that's motivating in its own sense. Exactly. Exactly. So acquiring the knowledge automatically. Okay, guys. I was going to do a part about using online practice in the classroom, but I'm conscious of the fact that we've gone 10 minutes into your break. So hopefully we'll have the opportunity to do that another time. Thank you very much for your attention and your participation, and good luck.
Thank you, Zaid. The next item on the agenda is entitled How to Teach Communicative Grammar by Terry Craddock. But you have a short break until 11. So I'll see you then. Thank you.